Welcome to First Line Compliance's Carefully Off the Cuff.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining. I'm Josh.
And I'm Ray from First Line Compliance. Today we're going to be talking about HMDA, also known as Regulation C. This is the point where the law requirement of collecting the data, reporting it annually, and giving it to the government. We know that. I think there's sometimes expectation that it's relatively simple to do. How tough could it be? It's a data point. You collect it, you dump it, you report it. But those who have done it before probably know it's a little more complicated than that, just operationally, and then some of it technically insofar as interpretive. So today we're going to be talking about that. I think it's important to know that HMDA, as much as we talk as just data points, keep in mind there's been a tremendous amount of kind of quiet enforcement, maybe even loud enforcement actions on HMDA and the accuracy of the data. There seems to be an expectation by our regulators that the information is perfect. As we know in our world, we're dealing with tens of thousands of records at a minimum, plus anywhere from 20 to 80 data points that we have to give. Precision is going to be difficult, but we do the best we can. Some of it, I think, is interpretive. What do we mean by loan amount? Where do we get it? What kind of loan amount? Those are the things we get challenged with as well. So I think it's really important to not just manage it in the sense of collecting the data and tightening it up, reporting, et cetera, but also how you manage through it and how you manage the data and your employees during the year before you file HMDA on March 1st. One of the things I think was a measure, and Josh and I've talked about this before, and then I've done it before, is the do not wish to provide measure, right? It's kind of you would take a look at pull a report on, see how often loan officers are checking a do not wish to provide. And there's a certain percentage that seems to be kind of a sweet spot where borrowers really say, I do not wish to provide. But if you pull that information and you see that number is higher than what it should be, that could be an issue. That could be a measure of people are taking shortcuts maybe in HMDA they shouldn't. The real significance to that, and I remind these people, because I do give these in my past, I've given these reports to people, on a monthly, maybe sometimes a weekly basis, saying, here's the scorecard. I remind them that this information is public and that we're not the only ones that we can see perhaps that we're not performing as well as we should. Someone else will take it as a measure, and then maybe they target you. Who knows? When I say they, could be regulators, right? So remember, this is public data as well. So I think it's really important to take a look on how we handle this, how we change behavior if it's not where we want it to be. And there's certain methodology to that. I know, Josh, you kind of dealt with this in your space many times and operationalizing it to a point of getting the data to be pretty darn clean by the time it's March 1st. So let me guess, I'm guessing you didn't start on like February 25th. You probably started March 2nd is my guess for the next year, right?
Not far off. And what I would say is let's kind of take us up a level, the 50,000 foot view. The way I initially look at HMDA is almost under like a 4 pillars perspective, or 4 key areas that I look at that I think lenders should consider as they're approaching HMDA compliance and the overall HMDA process. And so those 4 pillars I look at as first, governance. That's things like policy and procedure. Have we at a company level determined what our definition of a complete application is? The second component is data collection. The third is data scrubbing. And the fourth is then filing the HMDA LAR. And the better we are at the earlier stages of the pillars, the easier the subsequent ones will be. So for example, if our policy is clear and identifies what our definition of a complete application is, we can then take that and program that into our loan origination system, into our LOS. We can then use business rules and other system controls that help to perfect or cleanse or sanitize the data as we're collecting it. So we've got a higher likelihood that it's accurate and complete. My recommendation for anyone but a very small HMDA filer is that we're scrubbing HMDA data on a monthly basis. If you're the smallest size of HMDA filers, quarterly may be okay, but I really recommend not going beyond every quarter to scrub your data. And that's for multiple reasons. The first, if you identify that there's a systemic issue or a trend that you're seeing, if we're waiting till the end of the year to correct it, it's too late. By reviewing on a monthly basis, we have the opportunity to identify and become aware of challenges or issues that might be there and go back and correct them. Also, if we identify that there's some information missing or that we still need, if we ask the loan originator or the processor about it the next month, pretty good chance they're going to remember. If we wait 3 months, 6 months till the end of the year, they have no idea. and it's going to be far more difficult to get the data and populate it accurately and correctly. So that data collection really important, that monthly scrubbing process really important. And by doing this scrubbing, we not only identify issues or areas of opportunity for improvement in our HMDA data, but it's a really good pulse or check of the pulse on our ECOA compliance as well. Do we have files that are taking a long time to move through the pipeline? Do we have files that had a low credit score that never met our definition of application for HMDA, so they're not going to be reported under HMDA, but they still need to have an adverse action under ECOA or FCRA? So again, another couple of key points. If we've got our scrubbing accurate, then our filing process come March is really easy. Or even before March, we can hit the deadline earlier. So kind of taking that 50,000 foot approach, what are the pieces we need to consider in our process? We can then start drilling down into some more of the details. And so part of the details, I would say, Ray, you mentioned this earlier. If you're not reviewing your HMDA data, you're really the only one. Your peers, exactly. The regulators, community activists who are revising or reviewing how lenders are serving different communities that they may be interested in. These are all really critical elements. I also would say that as an examiner or someone who comes in from the outside to review our HMDA data, the HMDA data is a key element or a potentially telegraph sign of the strength of our overall compliance management system or CMS. That is, if a regulator comes in and identifies that we've got highly accurate and correct HMDA data, the implication is we've got an effective CMS. Mm-hmm. The opposite is also true. If they come in and see, oh, we've got some sloppy HMDA data or don't have controls around our collection or scrubbing, the regulator is going to assume if we don't have accuracy in our data, how can we have the capacity to correctly oversee or supervise what it is our institution is doing? How do we monitor fair lending? How do we monitor the markets that we're serving? How do we monitor peer comparison or peer analysis? So that HMDA data becomes a really key component of determining how effective our overall CMS is. As I mentioned fair lending and how data tells a story, Ray, let me kick it back to you to talk about a couple of areas where we've been seeing HMDA data and the importance in some enforcement actions and activity we've been seeing.
Right. So for the most part, what we're seeing is the accuracy of the data, and I think and there's certain to be expectations of precision. A lot of it has to do, in my opinion, is you have to look at making decisions of what the data is to begin with. That is, and maybe Josh, you can walk us through some of this. Then have to give the answers, but what to look for is you're looking at, the loan amount, right? So you have to make sure you have the right loan amount. Well, you might have the loan amount in 3 different areas, and it might be 3 different loan amounts. One that was requested, one that we underwrote to, one that we funded with, making it up, right? Other issues I've seen.
Ray, just real quick on loan amount, because I think that's a really key point. Not only is it what stage in the loan, but what was the disposition? One of the key areas as we're helping clients review HMDA data that we see as an industry challenge point is accurately capturing the loan amount for loans that were not originated.
Correct.
Loans that were originated, pretty straightforward, take it off of the CD, the note, we're good. Loans that were not originated, the general intention is that we report the loan amount initially applied for. So how do we capture that loan amount? Do we have a policy level on what that loan amount initially applied for is? And do we have a source document we can tie back to? Are we using the IRLA? Are we using the loan estimate? Is that what we're going to use on loans as a source document to support our source data to ensure that we're reporting correctly? If we didn't send an IRLA or didn't send an LE because it was so early in the process, was it truly a HMDA application? And if so, what source document or what data point are we going to use to report in that instance?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a critical point, because I think one thing we tend to forget, or at least in some ways in the process, don't forget that HMDA reporting requires your declined loans as well. And while we think that's easy, remember, you might only have one phone call with the borrower to collect the data we need. And so you can't go back and call them back and say, hey, I know we declined your loan, but can you give me your birth date? There might be some challenges there. So we have to make sure the collection process is important as well, and make sure the behavior, which goes back to why I would monitor who is really behaving and collecting data legitimately and cleanly to begin with. So I think, again, the collection process as well as in defining things. So, Josh, we talk about, it says now we have to, since the last 4 years, we have to collect the AUS. Well, which one? If I ran it, on, which one? Like more than one AUS, and well, the one that decided, I don't know which one that was all the time. These are the challenges we have to deal with. What I say, and I think we talked about that is at some point you have to make a decision. When there is ambiguity within the rule, which there is some, about what do they mean by this data point, you're gonna have to pick one and stick with it, right? So I mean, that's kind of how you want to report it. You don't want to be all over the map, but sometimes I do it here, sometimes I do it there. It's like, no, it's always the last one. There's always the one that's the underwriter used, whatever it might be, like AUS being an example. I think that's kind of you have to do it, right, Josh?
Yeah, so your point of consistency is a key one. Back to the policy component. Do you have a company level or a company baseline of how things should go? If you do, then we'll be consistently reporting data. Back to the CMS comment, that is one of the things regulators are looking for. Do our staff, do our employees follow our policy? If they do, but we happen to have a technical foot fault in the way that we've developed our procedure, the regulators are not going to be too aggressive in punishing us for that foot fault, so long as we correct it. Because the assumption is if our team followed it the wrong way, when we adjust it and fix it, they're going to follow it the right way. So we'll resolve that issue because of our consistency of application and the fact that our team does, in fact, follow our rules and procedures. To your point on AUS, some areas are gray, some are black and white and clear. So for example, we may run DU or LPA, but if it's an FHA loan, we know we're reporting total. So do we have the additional data, not just what the HMDA LAR data is, but additional data from the loan that can help us compare or do analysis, or as I call it, sanity testing, to revalidate that the data that we're reporting is in fact accurate. Let me pivot a little bit away from the weeds of the HMDA component, because I think, again, bringing us a little farther out helps us to understand some of the importance and criticality around HMDA performance. So there are two cases that are pretty talked about right now in the industry, one for Townstone and one for Trident. The reason these are important is because both were independent mortgage banks, and these are redlining cases that were brought by the Bureau. Townstone still going through litigation, Trident settled. Key to both of these was HMDA analysis. How well did those two lenders perform against their peers? Did they deny more frequently? Did they approve less frequently? Really important for lenders to be looking at these cases and reading the tea leaves from them. Are there things that we can take and see that were brought up in those cases that we can potentially take improvement in our shops? Are there areas where we can do our own HMDA analysis? We can do the process of identifying our own peers and doing some mock testing or sampling so that we identify anything potentially problematic before anyone else sees it.
And Josh, if I could, I think you hit a key nerve is you said it. We said it before, and say it again, and now this really kind of defines it. When you're a lender, you have the data. You can't say I didn't know. And I think that's sometimes, I can't say in Townstone or in Trident specifically, but if you have someone come in and then say, this is what we have the data look like, it was, oh, we didn't know. It doesn't roll very well when it's like, well, we knew, it's knowable, we just chose not to do something with it. And as a result, because fair lending is completely pivoted on the HMDA data, if you don't do HMDA well, it's going to flow into fair lending risk. Not just the numbers will show badly. It's just there will be those who can much govern us that will be concerned they can't even do a fair lending analysis because the data is so bad, or et cetera. So that's why they're so key on making sure it's right. They want to be able to do fair lending. If you shortcut that to the point that the data is not clean for them, they even get a little bit more aggressive. You don't get out of you don't get forgiven on your fair lending performance if you don't collect the data. It's even worse. You have to collect the data so you can measure. So I think that's really what it's particularly with these two enforcement actions. That's what we can learn from that is you got the data, you got to look at it yourself. I think that's very key. So fair lending is a very key point with HMDA, and why it's driven. And so while we think it's just a data thing and not a big deal and just dump it, no, people know. And you can validate the information between what you actually captured, so the actual source document to the information. This stuff has trails. It's knowable information, and others can tell if you're getting it right or not. They will measure if you're getting it right or not.
Just we're gonna play good cop bad cop here. So Ray is raining on the parade. I'm gonna be the sunshine and rainbows. This data, this observation of the data we have, also can identify opportunities. particularly in down markets, we're looking for areas where we can do better, areas where we've been successful or can increase lending. If we can identify in our data not only areas where we may not be doing as well as our peers, that's a great opportunity to do better. But it also will highlight for us areas where we're doing well, so let's keep doing those. If we identify a particular geography, a particular product type, and we can increase our origination volume, we don't know that unless we can read the data. So read the data, you'll identify not just those opportunities, but some successful ways of dealing with potential challenges before they really become problems. I think one last piece to me, and then we'll try and wrap it up here. As it comes to the HMDA regulation itself, I do think it's important to highlight that the way the regulation was written is intentionally broad. What I mean by that is this is not a one-size-fits-all reg. We have the lenders with the highest lending volume, as well as shops with the lowest lending volume, or almost lowest lending volume, as long as you've met the HMDA reporting threshold, that are required to report data in the same way. But the complexity, both of the institution and the products that are offered, may dictate the policies or direction that we take on reporting or collecting HMDA. Not just our definition of application, we talked about things like loan amount, how we devise whether loan purpose was reported correctly. All of these things are important so that as we're creating our policy, we understand that there's not always a black and white answer. It often takes the compliance officer, I love the phrase Ray uses, a HMDA coach, to help define our gray. Mm-hmm. When it's not clear, what do we do to make sure that we can make it clear, that we can define it within our policies, and that we can implement it in our shop so that it's consistently followed by our people? The better we are at doing that, the more in compliance we are with the reg, but I think operationally the better off we are to get our HMDA right.
Agreed. So thanks, Josh. I think at the end of the day, what we're hearing is focus on, I would say we'd first start with knowing your data. In other words, understanding and defining it as what it means to you. Making a commitment to go through the data probably monthly to see how are we doing and what can we backfill the information. I mean, backfill meaning we have the information there, it's just not mapping correctly. Probably focus on data management to the best you can. So if you can improve your technology so it automates better, it makes everything easier, it's even better. And of course, ensuring you've got the right behavior throughout the company to make sure the data is even collected to begin with and collected correctly. So I think that's going to be key. Ultimately, you're going to have to make some decisions, policy decisions on how to move forward. I think we should do that. Every lender should do that. As you kind of said, Josh, but I like it. The HMDA coach, if you need someone who can walk you through it, put it through, it's putting a process in place. Once the process in place, it works great. But getting it in place, if you need help, get a HMDA coach to help define these things. So it's kind of where I'm at. I mean, it's what I think about HMDA. Again, we think sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's the one that's the reg we don't want to talk about sometimes. But I think it's extremely critical and it's doable. It's just a matter of a certain level of commitment, not a lot, but a certain level of commitment to get it right. Right, Josh?
I would totally agree. And certainly HMDA is sometimes scary or challenging for a lot of folks. We love it. We are self-professed HMDA geeks. We work with a lot of lenders of different size and structures, both on implementing or building your HMDA process and policy and the data collection process, as well as working on scrubbing and filing the LAR. Start now. We know the deadline is March. The earlier we prepare, the better we'll be for year end. Reach out to us if we can help, if we can answer questions or point you in the right direction. We're more than happy to. We're available and have plenty on the team who have probably seen almost everything.
Yeah.
So that is one of the areas that I do say when you've hit a challenge or a question that we don't know the answer to or we haven't experienced, the best way to figure that out is to talk to someone who has. If that's something we can help with, we'd love to talk with you.
All right, Josh. Well, thanks. I think we did good on HMDA. We'll see what happens. Any questions, like I said, contact us, reach out, whichever it is. So thanks again, everyone, for listening, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Subscribe, rate, review, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.